He mopped floors for 20 years, then saved the company in 20 seconds. Welcome to Tales by Orion. Let's uncover what really happened. The late-night quiet of Sterling Valerius Industries' global headquarters was a sacred, almost monastic thing. The usual daytime cacophony of ringing phones, hushed, urgent conversations, and the relentless, almost imperceptible hum of a multi-billion-dollar empire in motion had subsided, leaving behind a profound, echoing stillness. It was in this silence that Samuel Hayes, a man whose presence was as unobtrusive as the gentle rhythm of his floor polisher, did his best work. At 57, Samuel was a man etched with the fine lines of a life lived in quiet dignity and unwavering resilience. He was a night shift janitor, a ghost in a gray uniform who moved through the opulent, deserted corridors of corporate power, his movements economical, his presence a fleeting, almost apologetic whisper. To the few late working executives who might occasionally catch a glimpse of him, he was simply the cleaner, a peripheral figure, a part of the seamless, silent machinery that erased the day's messy realities and restored the illusion of pristine, effortless perfection for the next morning's battles. They rarely, if ever, saw the keen intelligence in his quiet, observant dark eyes, or the profound, almost weary, understanding of human nature that lay behind his unassuming demeanor. They certainly didn't know that Samuel Hayes, the unassuming janitor, was a man of vast, though uncredited, intellectual genius. His mind, even as his hands meticulously cleaned the polished mahogany of the boardroom table, hummed with the complex intricacies of advanced mathematics, of logical paradoxes, of the elegant, irrefutable beauty of a perfectly balanced equation. He was a self-taught scholar, a man whose tiny, cramped apartment was filled not with expensive furniture, but with worn, second-hand textbooks on everything from theoretical physics to advanced game theory, whose nights were often spent not in sleep, but in poring over dense academic papers or sketching complex proofs on scrap paper. But in this world, the world of Sterling Valerius, those pursuits were irrelevant. Here, his value was measured in the gleam of the marble floors, the dust-free surfaces of antique furniture, the pristine appearance of the executive washroom's countless, often abused, amenities. He accepted his role with a quiet stoicism, a dignity that was born of necessity. His daughter, Ilara, a brilliant, ambitious young woman currently navigating the treacherous, expensive waters of a prestigious law school, was the sun in his quiet, solitary universe, the driving force behind his relentless, back-breaking labor. Every floor he mopped, every toilet he scrubbed, every trash can he emptied, was a small, silent act of love, of duty, a contribution to a future he might never see, but for which he was fiercely, unwaveringly committed. He had once dreamed of a different life, of a career in academia, of contributing to the grand tapestry of human knowledge. But life, with its cruel, indifferent twists, had derailed those dreams. A family tragedy, a devastating financial setback, and the sudden, crushing weight of single fatherhood had forced him to trade his scholarly pursuits for a cleaning cart, his intellectual ambitions for the practical realities of survival. He rarely spoke of his past, not even to his few colleagues. It was a locked room within him, filled with ghosts and what-ifs, a place too painful to revisit. So, he moved through the glittering, deserted world of Sterling Valerius, a silent philosopher, charting the orbits of the powerful, his own star long since fallen, or so it seemed. He cleaned their messes, absorbed the casual, almost invisible, evidence of their triumphs and their anxieties, the discarded champagne corks, the crumpled, tear-stained tissues, the half-eaten, extravagantly expensive catered meals, with a quiet, observant resilience, his true self hidden beneath layers of practiced invisibility, a secret held close like a precious, fragile fragment of starlight. Tonight, however, the usual late-night quiet of the executive floor was shattered. The boardroom, a space usually shrouded in darkness at this hour, was ablaze with light, its massive, floor-to-ceiling windows glowing like a beacon of corporate distress against the dark, star-dusted sky. The air, when Samuel approached with his cleaning cart, was thick with the scent of stale coffee, of expensive, anxious cologne, and of a palpable, almost suffocating tension. A crisis was unfolding. A problem of immense and apparently unsolvable complexity. And Samuel Hayes, the quiet janitor, the invisible man, was about to find himself, for the first time in his long, unassuming career, at the very heart of the storm. Inside the Sterling Valerius boardroom, the atmosphere was a toxic cocktail of exhaustion, frustration, and a dawning, almost palpable panic. Alastair Sterling, the formidable CEO, a man whose icy composure was legendary, paced before the massive, interactive whiteboard that dominated one wall, his face a mask of escalating agitation. His team of top executives, a collection of the brightest, most aggressive, and most highly paid minds in the business world, sat slumped around the polished mahogany table, their bespoke suits rumpled, their usually confident faces ashen, their eyes glazed with a mixture of fatigue and sheer, unadulterated intellectual defeat. For 3 days they had been locked in this room, wrestling with a problem of such staggering complexity that it threatened to bring a multi-billion-dollar, globally significant logistical project to a grinding, catastrophic halt. The problem, a logistical paradox of their own making, involved the optimization of a new, global supply chain network, a network so vast, so intricate, so riddled with variables, fluctuating fuel costs, shifting geopolitical alliances, unpredictable weather patterns, complex labor regulations, that it had defied every conventional analytical tool, every sophisticated algorithm, every predictive model in their considerable arsenal. The system, in essence, was eating itself. Every solution they proposed for one part of the network created a cascade of new, even more complex problems in another. It was a Gordian knot of logistical impossibility, $100 million problem that was now, with each passing hour, threatening to metastasize into a full-blown corporate cataclysm. No, it is not right. Alastair Sterling roared, his voice, usually so controlled, now raw with frustration as he stared at the latest, failed simulation on the massive whiteboard. The variables, the dependencies. There is a fundamental disharmony, a subtle, cascading failure in the system that we are simply not seeing. It is like a magnificent, intricate clock, but with a single, invisible, broken gear that is throwing the entire mechanism into chaos. What is it? Vice President Henderson, a burly man with a reputation for ruthless efficiency but little patience for abstract thinking, shook his head, a gesture of weary defeat. "Sir," he began, his voice hoarse, "we have run every conceivable scenario. The algorithms are sound. The data is clean. Perhaps the system is simply too complex. Perhaps the variables are, in fact, truly random, truly unpredictable." Unpredictable. A list. Sterling whirled on him, his eyes blazing. "Henderson, we do not pay you a 7-figure salary to tell me that $100 million problem is unpredictable. There is always a pattern. There is always a solution. We are simply not seeing it." He ran his hands through his silver-streaked hair, a gesture of such uncharacteristic loss of composure that it sent a fresh wave of anxiety through his already terrified executive team. They were at an impasse, a dead end. Their collective brilliance, their years of experience, their immense resources, all utterly useless in the face of this seemingly unsolvable puzzle. Outside, in the hushed, deserted corridor, Samuel Hayes paused in his work, his cleaning cart laden with its familiar, mundane tools. He could hear the raised voices, the palpable tension emanating from the boardroom. He had been cleaning this floor, this building, for over a decade. He knew the rhythms of the place, the subtle shifts in its atmosphere. He knew that the lights still burning in the boardroom at this ungodly hour, the raw, frustrated anger in the CEO's voice signaled a crisis of monumental proportions. He continued his work, his movements quiet, unobtrusive, his presence, as always, utterly invisible to the powerful men locked in their high-stakes battle just a few feet away. As he meticulously cleaned the glass wall of the boardroom, his gaze, almost involuntarily, drifted towards the massive, interactive whiteboard, a chaotic, dazzling tapestry of complex equations, of intricate flowcharts, of interconnected nodes and branching, dead-end pathways. He was not trying to eavesdrop, not trying to intrude, but his mind, his brilliant, restless, and deeply, profoundly analytical mind, couldn't help but see. He saw not just a jumble of numbers and lines, but a system, a complex, interconnected, and deeply, profoundly flawed system. He saw the patterns, the hidden dependencies, the subtle, almost invisible, logical fallacies that had eluded the high-powered executives inside. He saw the broken gear, the fundamental, conceptual error that was causing the entire, magnificent machine to grind to a halt. It was a flaw so simple, so elegant in its destructive power, that it had been overlooked by minds trained to see only complexity, to seek only convoluted, data-driven solutions. Samuel felt a familiar pang, a ghost of his former life, a whisper of the academic, the scholar he had once been. He saw the solution, clear and bright in his mind's eye, a single, elegant equation that would untie the Gordian knot, that would restore harmony to the chaotic system. But he said nothing. He was the janitor. His job was to clean, to polish, to be silent. Not to offer unsolicited solutions to multi-billion-dollar logistical paradoxes. His voice, in this world, was to remain unheard. He thought of his daughter, Elara, of her brilliant mind, of her own quiet, relentless pursuit of knowledge, of the future he was so desperately, so humbly trying to build for her. He thought of the quiet dignity of his own, long-suppressed, intellectual life. And a strange, almost reckless, courage began to stir within him. The company, he knew, was in trouble. Profound, existential trouble. And he, Samuel Hayes, the invisible man, the quiet janitor, held the key to its salvation. But what good was a key if it remained in one's pocket? What good was a truth if it remained unspoken? The dilemma was a torment, a silent, internal battle that raged within him, as fierce as high stakes, as the one unfolding in the brightly lit and increasingly desperate boardroom just a few feet away. The boardroom meeting descended further into a state of weary, acrimonious despair. Henderson, the vice president, was now openly arguing with Miller, the head of logistics, their voices sharp, their accusations bitter, each man desperately trying to deflect blame to protect his own professional territory. The other executives had retreated into a sullen, exhausted silence, their faces a mask of defeat, their expensive suits looking more like funeral attire with each passing, unproductive hour. Alistair Sterling, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, had finally slumped into his chair at the head of the table, his usual formidable presence diminished, his legendary control completely and terrifyingly absent. He stared at the chaotic, unsolvable puzzle on the whiteboard, a monument to his own and his team's spectacular failure. Outside, Samuel Hayes continued his quiet, methodical work, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The solution to the problem on the whiteboard was so clear to him, so elegant in its simplicity, that it was almost a physical ache to keep it to himself. It was like watching a master craftsman use the wrong tool for a delicate, intricate job, knowing that a simple, subtle adjustment would make all the difference. He saw Henderson, in a fit of frustration, grab a stylus and begin to frantically redraw a section of the flowchart on the whiteboard, his movements angry, imprecise, further tangling the already hopelessly convoluted logic of the system. It was a move born of pure, unadulterated desperation, a flailing attempt to impose order on a system whose fundamental principles he simply did not understand. And in that moment, something within Samuel Hayes snapped. It was not a conscious decision, not a rational calculation of risk and reward. It was a profound, almost instinctual reaction, the reaction of a master craftsman witnessing an act of unforgivable, almost sacrilegious incompetence. It was the reaction of a man who loved, who revered the elegant, irrefutable beauty of a perfectly balanced equation, now watching it being brutalized by the clumsy, ignorant hands of men who saw only numbers, not the profound, underlying truth they represented. Before he even knew what he was doing, Samuel found himself pushing open the heavy, soundproof door to the boardroom, his cleaning cart, with its familiar, mundane tools, standing sentinel in the corridor behind him. The sudden, unexpected intrusion of the cleaner, the janitor, the invisible man, into their high-stakes, hermetically sealed world had an instantaneous, stunning effect. The arguing ceased. The sullen silence deepened. Every eye in the room, filled with a mixture of shock, confusion, and a dawning, almost comical, disbelief, turned to him. Samuel stood in the doorway, a small, unassuming figure in his gray uniform, his hands, calloused and strong, clasped before him, his quiet blue eyes, usually so carefully guarded, now holding a flicker of something new, a quiet, unwavering, almost apologetic authority. Alistair Sterling looked up, his own eyes, usually so sharp, so cold, now clouded with a weary, almost bewildered surprise. "Yes?" he inquired, his voice hoarse, his tone more one of curious exhaustion than genuine annoyance. "What is it? Do you need to clean in here?" "No, Mr. Sterling," Samuel said, his voice quiet but firm, carrying effortlessly through the vast, silent room. I apologize for the intrusion, but I believe you are approaching the problem incorrectly." The words, so simple, so direct, so utterly, breathtakingly audacious, landed with the force of a physical blow. The executives stared, their jaws slack, their faces a mask of stunned, incredulous outrage. Henderson's face, which had been pale with frustration, now turned a mottled, furious red. "What did you say?" he roared, his voice dripping with a venomous, almost hysterical contempt. "What did this janitor just say?" Miller, the logistics head, allowed a short, sharp bark of derisive laughter. "He said we're approaching the problem incorrectly. Henderson, can you believe the nerve? The sheer, unadulterated impertinence." But Alistair Sterling did not laugh. He did not roar. He simply stared at Samuel, a strange, almost unreadable expression on his face. He saw not just a janitor, but a man of quiet dignity, of unwavering composure, a man whose eyes held a depth, a quiet intelligence that he had never before noticed. "Explain yourself," Alistair said, his voice dangerously soft, a silent command that cut through the rising tide of indignation from his executive team. Samuel took a deep, steadying breath. He walked, not with the hesitant, apologetic shuffle of a janitor, but with the quiet, confident stride of a scholar, a teacher, towards the massive whiteboard, toward the chaotic, tangled mess of their failed solutions. He picked up a stylus, his movements precise, almost reverent. "With all due respect, gentlemen," he began, his voice still quiet, but now imbued with a new, almost pedagogical, authority. "You are looking for a complex solution to what is, in essence, a very simple problem. You're trying to force a linear, sequential logic onto a system that is by its very nature dynamic, interconnected, and fundamentally nonlinear." He then, with a few swift, elegant strokes of the stylus, erased a large section of their convoluted flowchart. The executives gasped, a collective sound of horrified disbelief. Henderson looked as though he might have a stroke. But Alistair Sterling remained silent, his gaze fixed on Samuel, his mind, for the first time in days, feeling a flicker of something, a glimmer of a new, unexpected, and perhaps, just perhaps, brilliantly simple possibility. "The problem, gentlemen," Samuel continued, his voice calm, steady, "is not in the variables. It is in your fundamental assumption. You're trying to optimize each part of the system in isolation. But the system is not a collection of isolated parts. It is a whole, an interconnected, interdependent, living organism. And its true optimization lies not in maximizing the efficiency of each individual component, but in achieving a state of dynamic equilibrium, a balance, a harmony. He then, with a speed and a precision that was breathtaking to behold, began to draw a new diagram on the whiteboard. It was not a flowchart. It was an equation, a single, elegant, and breathtakingly simple equation. An equation that seemed to capture, with a profound, almost mystical clarity, the very essence of the complex, chaotic system that had so utterly, so completely defeated them. He had not just identified the broken gear. He had, in a few swift, elegant strokes, redesigned the entire magnificent and now, finally, comprehensible machine. The boardroom remained suspended in a state of stunned, almost reverent silence. The executives stared at the elegant, simple equation Samuel had scrawled on the whiteboard, its stark, undeniable logic a profound and deeply humbling rebuke to their own, far more complex and ultimately fruitless efforts. They were men of immense intellect, of vast experience, of prestigious degrees from the world's finest universities. And they had just been schooled by a janitor. Henderson, his face a mask of bewildered, almost comical disbelief, was the first to speak. But that's impossible, he stammered, his voice a mere shadow of its usual booming authority. That defies every principle of modern logistical theory. It's too simple. Simplicity, Mr. Henderson, Samuel replied, his voice still quiet, but now imbued with the gentle, patient authority of a seasoned professor, is not the same as simplistic. Often, the most profound truths are found not in complexity, but in the elegant, underlying principles that govern all systems, whether they be celestial, biological, or logistical. Miller, the head of logistics, a man whose entire career had been built on complex algorithms and data-driven models, now stared at the equation with a dawning, almost religious awe. He saw its beauty, its elegance, its profound, undeniable, mathematical truth. "My God," he whispered, his voice thick with a mixture of shame and a dawning, almost overwhelming, respect. He's right. It works. The math, it's perfect. He looked at Samuel, truly looked at him, for the first time, not as an invisible functionary, but as a peer, a superior, a man whose intellect, whose understanding, so clearly, so profoundly, eclipsed his own. Who are you?" Miller asked, his voice a hushed, almost reverent whisper. Samuel simply offered him a faint, almost sad smile. "I am Samuel Hayes," he said, his voice quiet, unassuming. "I'm a night shift janitor, and I am a student of patterns, of systems, of the quiet, elegant truths that are so often overlooked in the noisy pursuit of conventional solutions." Alastair Sterling had not moved. He had not spoken. He had simply watched, his mind, his world, his very understanding of reality being systematically and profoundly recalibrated. He looked at Samuel, at his calm, dignified posture, at the quiet, almost weary, wisdom in his dark eyes. He saw not just a janitor, but a man of immense, untapped genius, a man whose brilliant mind had been, for reasons he couldn't yet comprehend, relegated to the shadows, to the menial, thankless task of cleaning up the messes of men who were, in every way that truly mattered, his intellectual inferiors. He thought of the immense, almost obscene, salaries he paid the men in this room, the men who had just spent 3 days and countless company resources failing to solve a problem that this quiet, unassuming janitor had unraveled in a matter of seconds. The sheer, unadulterated waste of it all, the profound, systemic, and deeply human injustice of it, struck him with the force of a physical blow. A wave of shame, so potent, so overwhelming, that it almost buckled him, washed over him. He, Alastair Sterling, the master of efficiency, the ruthless architect of a global empire built on the principle of maximizing assets, had been presiding over the most egregious, most unforgivable waste of human potential imaginable. He had, in his blind, arrogant pursuit of profit, of power, of conventional metrics of success, overlooked the most valuable asset in his entire multi-billion-dollar organization, the quiet, brilliant, and utterly, profoundly underestimated mind of Samuel Hayes. "Mr. Hayes," Alastair Sterling said finally, his voice hoarse, raspy, barely a whisper. He rose from his chair, his movements stiff, almost awkward, and walked towards Samuel, his usual formidable presence now replaced by a new, almost humbling, deference. He extended his hand, not as a CEO to a janitor, but as one man to another, a man acknowledging a profound and deeply personal debt. "Mr. Hayes," he repeated, his voice gaining a new, unfamiliar, and deeply human emotion. I don't know what to say. What you have just done, it is nothing short of miraculous." Samuel took his hand, his own grip firm, steady, his quiet dignity a stark, powerful contrast to Alastair's own, suddenly very apparent, emotional turmoil. "It was not a miracle, Mr. Sterling," Samuel replied, his voice gentle. "It was just math, and a willingness to look at the problem from a different perspective." Alastair stared at him, his mind reeling, his world turned upside down. "A different perspective," he echoed, his voice a hushed, almost reverent whisper. He looked around the boardroom, at the stunned, humiliated faces of his executive team. He looked at the elegant, simple equation on the whiteboard, a testament to a brilliance that had been hidden in plain sight. And he looked at Samuel Hayes, the janitor, the scholar, the quiet, unassuming genius who had, in a few swift, elegant strokes, saved his company, his project, and perhaps, just perhaps, his very soul. And in that moment, Alastair Sterling knew, with a certainty that resonated in the deepest, most forgotten corners of his being, that this was not just the end of a corporate crisis. It was the beginning of a profound and utterly life-altering revolution. Not just for Sterling Valerius Industries, but for Alastair Sterling himself. The quiet janitor had not just solved a problem. He had, with his quiet wisdom, his profound integrity, his unwavering belief in the power of a different perspective, shattered the very foundations of Alastair's carefully constructed world. And in the rubble, a new, more hopeful, and infinitely more human future was about to be built. The stunned silence in the Sterling Valerius boardroom, once a space of arrogant pronouncements and strategic power plays, now held a different quality, a fragile, almost sacred awe. The high-powered executives, stripped of their usual self-assurance, looked from the elegant, irrefutable equation on the whiteboard to the quiet, unassuming janitor who had written it, their expressions a mixture of shame, disbelief, and a dawning, reluctant respect. Alastair Sterling, his own carefully constructed world irrevocably shattered, found himself looking at Samuel Hayes not as an employee, not as a subordinate, but as a teacher, a mentor, a quiet, powerful force who had, in a matter of moments, exposed the profound, systemic, and deeply human flaws in his own leadership, in his own worldview. "Mr. Hayes," Alastair began, his voice still hoarse, but now imbued with a new, almost humble sincerity. "What you have done here tonight, it is beyond mere problem-solving. It is a profound and deeply humbling lesson. A lesson I, and my entire team," he shot a pointed, not entirely unkind, glance at the now cowering Henderson and his equally mortified colleagues, "have clearly and desperately needed to learn." He paused, his gaze sweeping around the room, then settling, with a new, almost reverent, intensity on Samuel. "Tell me, Mr. Hayes," he continued, his voice dropping to a confidential, almost pleading tone. "A man of your obvious intellectual genius, a man who can unravel $100 million logistical paradox in seconds. What in God's name are you doing cleaning floors?" The question hung in the air, a stark, poignant acknowledgement of the profound, almost criminal, injustice of Samuel's situation. Samuel's gaze dropped to the floor for a moment, a flicker of old, familiar pain in his dark eyes. Then he looked up, his expression one of quiet, weary, and utterly dignified resignation. Life, Mr. Sterling, he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble, is itself a rather complex system, with unpredictable variables. Sometimes, the path one dreams of is not the path one is destined to walk. He spoke briefly of his past, of his love for mathematics, for the elegant, irrefutable beauty of a perfectly balanced equation, of his promising academic career, derailed by a family tragedy, by a sudden, catastrophic financial setback, by the crushing and ultimately inescapable weight of responsibility for his young, brilliant daughter, Ilara. He spoke not with bitterness, not with self-pity, but with a quiet, matter-of-fact acceptance of the choices he had made, of the sacrifices he had willingly, lovingly embraced. "My daughter, Mr. Sterling," Samuel concluded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips, "she is my greatest equation, my most profound and most beautiful discovery. In ensuring her future, her happiness, her success, that, sir, has been, and always will be, my life's most important work. The rest is just noise." Alastair Sterling listened, his heart aching with a profound, almost overwhelming sense of empathy, of a shared unspoken understanding of the immense, often heartbreaking, sacrifices of fatherhood. He thought of his own long-buried sorrow, of his own lost daughter, the daughter in whose name he had built an empire, yet whose memory he had, in his relentless pursuit of power and profit, so profoundly, so tragically betrayed. He looked at Samuel Hayes, at this quiet, brilliant, and deeply human man, a man who had, in the face of his own profound personal tragedy, chosen not the path of ambition, of power, of self-aggrandizement, but the path of love, of sacrifice, of a quiet, unwavering, and deeply honorable duty. And in that moment, Alastair Sterling saw not just a janitor, not just a genius, but a man of profound, almost saintly moral character, a man who represented everything he himself had, in his own selfish, grief-stricken, and ultimately hollow pursuit of success, so utterly, so completely lost. The shame, the regret, the dawning, painful, and deeply necessary self-awareness was a physical thing, a tightening in his chest, a burning behind his eyelids. Alastair Sterling, the Arctic Fox, the master of a global financial empire, was, he now realized with a chilling certainty, a profoundly, and perhaps even unforgivably impoverished man. "Mr. Hayes," Alastair said finally, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to suppress, "what you have done for this company tonight is incalculable. You have saved us from a catastrophic failure. You have, in a matter of moments, solved a problem that had utterly, completely defeated the best and brightest minds in this organization." He paused, his gaze sweeping over his now silent and deeply humbled executive team. "But what you have shown me, Mr. Hayes," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "what you have taught me about integrity, about sacrifice, about the true and often hidden meaning of success, that, sir, is a gift beyond price. And it is a gift that I, and this entire company, must and will honor." He walked towards Samuel, his movements no longer those of a powerful CEO, but of a man, a humble, grateful man, acknowledging a profound, life-altering debt. "Effective immediately, Mr. Hayes," Alastair Sterling announced, his voice ringing with a new, almost spiritual authority, "your position as a night shift janitor is terminated." A flicker of alarm, of confusion, crossed Samuel's face. But before he could speak, Alastair continued, a faint, almost mischievous smile touching his lips. "You are hereby appointed as the new Chief Strategic Analyst for Sterling Valerius Industries, with a salary and a benefits package commensurate with your rather extraordinary and until now criminally undervalued genius." "In your first official duty, Mr. Hayes," he added, his voice now imbued with a new, almost joyful energy, "will be to establish and to lead a new, independent, and very well-funded research and development division within this company. A division dedicated not to short-term profits, but to long-term, innovative, and perhaps even unconventional problem-solving. A division where minds like yours, Mr. Hayes, will not just be valued but celebrated, cherished, and given the freedom, the resources, the respect they so profoundly and so rightly deserve." He then turned to his stunned, silent, and now deeply terrified executive team. "And as for the rest of you," he said, his voice now cold as ice, a chilling, familiar echo of the Arctic fox returning, but now wielded not for personal gain, but for a new and infinitely more just purpose. "I suggest you all take a long, hard, and very, very humble look at the elegant, simple equation on that whiteboard. And I suggest you learn it, because it is a testament to a truth that will, from this day forward, be the guiding principle of this entire organization. That true genius, true value, true and lasting success is often found not in the noisy, arrogant, and ultimately hollow pursuit of conventional wisdom, but in the quiet, humble, and often profoundly underestimated corners of the world. And it is our duty, our responsibility, our most sacred and most profitable obligation to find it, to nurture it, and to honor it. Or we, and this entire company, will, I assure you, be rendered obsolete." The janitor, the scholar, the quiet, brilliant, and deeply human man had not just solved a problem. He had, with his quiet dignity, his profound wisdom, his unwavering integrity, sparked a revolution. A quiet revolution, yes, but a revolution that would, Alastair Sterling knew, with a certainty that resonated in the very core of his newly awakened soul, change everything. The restructuring of Sterling Valerius Industries, under the quiet, yet profound, influence of Samuel Hayes, was not a swift, brutal, corporate takeover, but a slow, methodical, and deeply human process of cultural transformation. The Hayes equation, as it came to be known within the hushed, reverent corridors of the company, became more than just a solution to a logistical problem. It became a symbol, a mantra, a guiding principle for a new way of thinking, of being, of doing business. Samuel Hayes, in his new role as Chief Strategic Analyst, proved to be as brilliant, as insightful, and as quietly devastatingly effective as Alastair Sterling had hoped and his former executive team had feared. He did not operate with the aggressive, ego-driven bravado of his colleagues. He operated with a quiet, almost meditative precision, his approach always rooted in a deep, holistic understanding of the complex, interconnected systems he was tasked with optimizing. He established the Division of Unconventional Analytics, a think tank populated not with the usual Ivy League business school graduates, but with a diverse, eclectic collection of brilliant, often overlooked minds, mathematicians, physicists, philosophers, artists, even a retired chess grandmaster. They became his team, his collaborators, his fellow students of the elegant, underlying patterns of the universe. And together, under Samuel's quiet, yet inspiring leadership, they began to solve problems that had long been deemed unsolvable. They developed innovative, sustainable solutions for global supply chain management, created predictive models for market fluctuations that were both breathtakingly accurate and ethically sound, and even, in their spare time, managed to solve a few long-standing theoretical paradoxes in the world of quantum physics, just for the sheer, unadulterated joy of it. Alastair Sterling, for his part, found a new and infinitely more fulfilling purpose in his role as CEO. He became Samuel's staunchest ally, his most enthusiastic champion, his immense power and influence now dedicated not just to the accumulation of wealth, but to the fostering of a new, more just, more humane, and ultimately, more successful corporate culture. He established the Ilera Hayes Scholarship, a multi-million-dollar fund named in honor of Samuel's brilliant law school-bound daughter, dedicated to providing educational opportunities for gifted, underprivileged students in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. He became a vocal advocate for corporate social responsibility, for ethical leadership, for the profound and often overlooked value of investing in the human potential of every single employee, regardless of their rank, their title, their background. The transformation of Sterling Valerius Industries became a case study in business schools around the world, a testament to the power of a different perspective, of a leadership style rooted not in dominance, but in humility, in respect, in a genuine, unwavering commitment to the greater good. The company's profits, paradoxically, soared to unprecedented heights, a powerful, undeniable refutation of the long-held corporate belief that ethics and profitability were mutually exclusive. Henderson, the once arrogant vice president, and his coterie of equally humbled executives, found themselves either adapting to this new, more human-centric reality or quietly, and very discreetly, being replaced. The culture of fear, of cynicism, of short-sighted greed was systematically and irrevocably dismantled, replaced by a new culture of collaboration, of innovation, of a shared and deeply meaningful purpose. Samuel Hayes, despite his new title, his immense salary, his profound influence, remained the same quiet, humble, and deeply human man he had always been. He still lived in his small, cramped apartment, though it was now filled with new, first-edition textbooks and a state-of-the-art telescope, a gift from Alistair, through which he and Alara would spend hours gazing at the distant, silent, and beautiful mysteries of the cosmos. He still, on occasion, late at night, when the vast, silent headquarters of Sterling Valerius were empty, would take out his old cleaning cart and slowly, methodically, polish the floors of the boardroom, not out of a sense of obligation, but out of profound, almost spiritual, need to remain grounded, to remember where he had come from, to honor the quiet dignity of the work that had, for so long, been his only and most steadfast companion. Alistair Sterling would sometimes find him there, in the dead of night, the two of them alone in the vast, silent room, a billionaire and a janitor, a CEO and a scholar, two solitary souls who had, through the strangest, most improbable of circumstances, found in each other a partner, a friend, a kindred spirit. They would stand together in the quiet, shared silence, looking out at the glittering, star-dusted city below, their conversation a low, easy murmur, ranging from the complexities of quantum entanglement to the simple, profound, and utterly beautiful joy of watching one's child succeed. The janitor, the man who had been invisible, had not just solved a problem. He had, with his quiet wisdom, his profound integrity, his unwavering belief in the power of a different perspective, transformed an empire. And in doing so, he had reminded a powerful, lonely, and deeply unhappy man that the most valuable assets are not listed on any stock exchange, that the most profound truths are not found in any quarterly report, and that the most elegant, most beautiful, and most perfect equation of all is the simple, undeniable, and infinitely precious mathematics of the human heart. The legacy of Samuel Hayes at Sterling Valerius Industries was not one of corporate restructuring or financial conquest, but of a profound and lasting cultural revolution. The division of unconventional analytics, his brainchild, became the company's heart and soul, a hub of innovation, of creativity, of a relentless, joyful, and deeply human pursuit of knowledge for its own sake and for the greater good. The story of the janitor who had solved the $100 million problem became a foundational myth within the company, a constant, powerful reminder of the profound, often untapped, potential that lay hidden within every individual, regardless of their title, their rank, their uniform. Alistair Sterling, under Samuel's quiet, steady, and unwavering moral guidance, continued his own personal transformation. He became a true visionary, a leader who understood that a company's greatest asset was not its intellectual property, not its market share, but its people. He championed policies that promoted work-life balance, that celebrated diversity, that fostered a culture of mutual respect, of genuine collaboration, of shared and deeply meaningful sense of purpose. He became a global advocate for ethical capitalism, for a new model of corporate responsibility that prioritized not just profit, but people and the planet. His own personal life, too, was transformed. The icy, remote Arctic fox, the man who had once found solace only in the cold, hard certainty of numbers, now found joy in the messy, unpredictable, and often profoundly beautiful complexities of human connection. He became a mentor, a friend, a quiet, unassuming philanthropist whose generosity was as vast and as discreet as his immense fortune. He still worked, still led, still wielded his immense power, but he did so with a new, profound, and deeply human wisdom, a wisdom that had been gifted to him by a quiet, unassuming janitor with a brilliant mind and a heart full of integrity. Samuel Hayes, for his part, never lost his humility, his quiet dignity, his profound connection to the simple, elegant truths that had always guided his life. He found immense satisfaction in his work, in the intellectual challenges, in the collaborative spirit of his team, in the tangible, positive impact their work had on the world. But his greatest joy, his most profound and most beautiful equation, remained his daughter, Ilara. He watched, with a quiet, overwhelming pride, as she graduated from law school at the top of her class, her own brilliant mind, her own fierce integrity, a testament to the quiet, powerful legacy of her father's love, his sacrifice, his unwavering belief in her potential. She turned down lucrative offers from prestigious corporate law firms, choosing instead to work for a small, nonprofit organization dedicated to fighting for social justice, for the rights of the underprivileged, the marginalized, the forgotten. She was her father's daughter, a quiet warrior, a brilliant, compassionate advocate for a more just, more equitable, and more human world. One cool, clear evening, years after their first, fateful encounter in the Sterling Valerius boardroom, Alastair Sterling stood with Samuel Hayes on the roof of the company's global headquarters. They were not alone. With them was Ilara, her own dark eyes, so like her father's, shining with a quiet, confident intelligence. The Hope Garden, Lily Carter's whimsical, and now fully realized, creation from another, equally transformative, tale in Alastair's life, bloomed around them, a vibrant, fragrant oasis high above the glittering, indifferent city. They stood before the massive, state-of-the-art telescope that Alastair had installed there, a gift not just to Samuel, but to the entire company, a symbol of their new, shared commitment to looking up, to seeing beyond the bottom line, to exploring the vast, beautiful, and often humbling mysteries of the universe. Do you ever miss it, Samuel? Alastair asked suddenly, his voice a low, resonant rumble, his gaze fixed on the distant, shimmering stars. Miss what, Alastair? Samuel replied, his own voice calm, steady, a quiet smile playing on his lips. The quiet of the night shift. Alastair said, a faint, almost wistful, humor in his tone. The rhythmic hum of the floor polisher, the blissful anonymity. Samuel was silent for a long moment, his dark, wise eyes reflecting the distant, ancient light of the stars. Sometimes, he admitted finally, his voice barely a whisper. Sometimes I miss the simplicity, the quiet, the illusion of a life where the most pressing concern was a stubborn stain on a marble floor or the perfect, streak-free shine on a boardroom window. He paused, then turned to look at Alastair, then at his daughter, Ilara, her face radiant with a quiet, fierce pride. But I will not trade this, Alastair. This is a different kind of quiet, a different kind of shine, a far more beautiful and far more meaningful equation. Alastair met his gaze, his own icy blue eyes, once so cold, now filled with a new, unfamiliar warmth, a deep, abiding, and profoundly human peace. Nor I, Samuel, he said softly, nor I. They stood together in the cool, clear night, three solitary souls who had, through the strangest, most improbable of circumstances, found in each other a family, a community, a shared and deeply beautiful sense of purpose. They had, in their own unique and profoundly human ways, saved each other. And as they looked up at the vast, indifferent beauty of the cosmos, at the swirling, distant galaxies, at the infinite, elegant patterns of the universe, they knew, with a certainty that resonated deeper than words, that the most profound truths, the most beautiful equations, the most valuable assets are not found in the noisy, arrogant, and ultimately hollow pursuit of power and profit, but in the quiet, humble, and often profoundly underestimated corners of the human heart. And sometimes all it takes is a willingness to look at the world from a different perspective, to listen to the quietest voice, to see the unseen, to recognize the profound and often life-altering genius that lies hidden, waiting to be discovered in the most unexpected and most unassuming of souls.